And I don't. One, here's the question. Here's the answer, and we'll talk about it.
That's great.
Are you frustrated with your individual performance this season, or do you feel like you control the things you could control?
I don't understand how to answer that question. I work as hard as I can at my individual performance. So I'm frustrated with our season. I'm responsible for everything. So I think you can figure that out.
Are you frustrated with your individual performance?
So, okay. So what do you think, Dieter?
That's the right answer. Right answer, wrong tone. Going to look a lot better in print than it does on video. One of those. That's a fair question. Has Kyle Shanahan been good this season? No, he hasn't. I don't think it's been only his fault by any stretch of the imagination. I think you'd have to be an idiot to pretend as if Kyle Shanahan is the thing holding this team back from unbridled greatness. But he's part of the problem. His inability to embrace pragmatism as the season was crumbling around him and dire circumstances demanded dire alternatives to the original plan. He didn't do it. We saw him funneling the ball to Deebo Samuel in a must-win game against the Rams. Deebo Samuel didn't deserve the ball the way that he had played all year, save for one game that meant nothing in Miami a week later. You watch the way that they handled the running backs and how when Christian McCaffrey came back, he just went back as if Christian McCaffrey was the same dude as last year when he was overtly not. And you watch the way that they called plays for Brock Purdy as the interior of the offensive line was getting destroyed repeatedly, and how he called offensive plays against teams that were running the same stuff, whether it was in their own best interest or not personnel-wise. But they were just running man-to-man, press man-to-man, the same stuff repeatedly, daring the 49ers to do something. And does it come down to the players? Absolutely. They're the ones who have to go out there and execute whatever the plan is. So it will always come down to, do you have the dudes? Do you have the players? But these game plans, I just do not think we're anywhere close to Kyle Shanahan's best. And we've seen fleeting moments of excellence, that genius that we love to cite in prior years. And I am in no way advocating that the dude loses his job, but there's some warts. There's some warts. And I think it's a totally fair question to say, are you disappointed in the way that you've performed this season? To scoff at that and say, I don't even know how to answer that question. I mean, a little defensive, eh?
Well, I mean, okay, first of all, total fair question. It's a very direct question when he is the central figure, because it really is saying,
damn right.
like,
He's damn right. It is all on
it's
him.
pointing the finger at him, going, "Hey, man." What's implied, I think, in the question, and tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about this.
No.
But what's implied in the question is you've had a bad year. Like
okay, I'll disagree with that. That's
okay.
That's only implied if you're anchored to that thought initially. Otherwise, it's a straightforward question. Brock Purdy would have handled that with aplomb, because Brock's been asked that question in about 10 different ways. How do you feel about your performance this year? Is a very straightforward question.
Wait. Let me redirect on this one. Do you think it's to me, it's the kind of question that if I ask it, I maybe get a different answer. Not saying any.
That's right.
Or if Jennifer Leachan asks it, maybe she gets a different answer. If Matt Barrow's asks it, maybe you get a different answer. I think a lot of the scoff, the looking away, the shortness, and the kind of the attitude is all because of the questioner, right? That's
entirely.
That's I'm not, and you know what? It is what it is.
That's fair.
I'm not going to evaluate.
He's entitled to have those opinions about people who question.
Don't you think if that question was asked by, I don't know. I mean, any number of other people in different ways, don't you think he would have given it a little bit more than he kind of feels like he knows that Grant's mad at him or after him or whatever. He's decided whatever, whether he is or isn't.
Called for his job like 45 times in the last 5 years. You think that that's the guy that he might not be as forthright about admitting his shortcomings to?
I do think without making this about anybody, but because I think it is a fair question too. Like, that is a fair question.
100%.
Everybody has to be evaluated. This is pro sports. You are the Super Bowl favorite, and you're not going to make the playoffs in what a lot of people think is one of the worst divisions in all of football.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's a conference that's gettable, extremely gettable.
In the midst of your go year, you didn't just go, you retreated.
Yeah. No, I listen. He understands.
It's fair.
It's a fair question. It could have been asked differently. I'm with you 100%. It's about who the questioner is. Now, listen.
Or that's the attitude that he gave there was totally about Grant
100%.
Asking the question. But unfortunately that also kind of dodges the actual question.
No, there was no way for him to answer it other than to say exactly what he said, right? Because you can't say, yes, I'm disappointed in my own performance, because that lets your players off the hook, and it implies a level of culpability that then will get run with ad nauseum, right? Like Kyle Shanahan, you do, it's the exact same line. It's the same thing that Brock would say, right? These are the two guys that have to dominate on the podium week in and week out. Kyle and Brock have to give good answers at press conferences because they're unquestionably the leaders of the team by the nature of being head coach and quarterback in the NFL. And what would Brock say in the same situation? We're not doing good enough. That's on me. It has nothing. It's a deflection in that I'm not going to stand up here and get into the nitty-gritty on personal evaluations because I can't win. The fact that you're asking that question, whether it's Larry asking it, Dieter asking it, Jennifer Lee Chan asking it, or Grant asking it, anyone asking that question, there's some answer that it's not coming from a place of benevolence intrinsically. Now, it can be coming from a less hostile tone, a less hostile source, to be sure. And as much as I agree with you that, hey, Grant is asking the question, so he immediately puts up his guard because Grant's been after him, right? Grant has, let's call it what it is. Grant has made a living out of calling for Kyle Shanahan's head, okay? And Grant makes very solid points. I don't agree with him. We can agree to disagree. None of this means anything. So when when that guy asks the question, you're like, well, yeah, I suck. Like, what are you supposed to say there? If I ask the question and Kyle adheres to, and I believe that he does in these press conferences, the first rule of football, know your personnel. You got to know your personnel when you're at the podium too. Who's asking me the question? Larry's asking the question because Larry loves to get down into the nitty-gritty on football. And Larry cares a lot about the 49ers. Dieter's asking the question because Dieter's trying to outsmart everybody all the time. Like, if Matt Mayoko's asking the question, it's because he's trying to get to the bottom of news things. Like, I don't need to give everybody the scouting report on everybody in there, but Kyle has a pretty decent idea from having done this twice a week for the last 7 years. Faces, attitudes, expectations, how they're coming at you. So, yeah, I don't have any problem with him being a little bit snippy towards Grant. That's their relationship. They got a weird thing going on. God bless them. Maybe one day they'll meet under the Eiffel Tower and kiss. But to say that he's frustrated with the season and that's on him, it could have been said to a million different reporters. That's the only answer you can give in that situation. I would love if we lived in a world where the head coach of the 49ers would actually get down into the nitty-gritty on his shortcomings or misconceptions of his shortcomings, right? Explain those as to why he did that, as opposed to letting us sort of live in this ambiguity. But that's not the world we live in, and that was probably not the venue for such a conversation. So did Kyle do a good job this year? No, he didn't. Full stop.
Right.
He doesn't need to tell you that.
Here's the bottom line. I mean, a lot of football coaches, I saw Jim Harbaugh push back on this as well. He used to say, hey guys, look, I'm not here to peel the onion. I don't want to peel the onion on this one. He used to use that line. Yeah. We're not going to peel the onion. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm trying to cook a stew, and we're going to need an onion, Jim. So yeah. I would really enjoy it. But
that was one of Jim's famous lines, and it's basically like, "Hey, we're going to, I'm going to control this narrative. We're not going to get into all these soft." I'm just
trying to give you some bullshit here, so I can get back to work. So can we just get on with the bullshitting now? No,
I mean, it's all the same. It's this. I I just don't want to. I don't want to play. I don't want to play with the media and this and that. But I mean, Kyle does play the game for the most part.
He
I does deserve some blame, but I think it's like obviously, it's kind of obvious when you are the head coach. It's so defining that the team's record is also your record.
Yeah, I mean,
like
Bill
Bill Walsh's record is the Niners' record when Walsh was the head coach. The Niners' record is that is the ultimate evaluation. Your record is so he's a 6-win coach this year. That's what he is, and so it's like he doesn't have to reflect on it because none of it's really useful or. And it's like the one job. It's like the one benefit of that job is that at the end of the year, you don't have to sit there and go, if you succeeded and reached your goals, and if you didn't, and exactly, what the score was, and they're going to go probably 6-11. I mean, they might win a 7th game, but most likely it's 6-11, and that's bad. I mean,
well, I don't know who's going to look at the end of this season and be like, man, they had a bad year. Like it crept up on
predicted 11-6. So
well,
I had
them pegged as a 9-win team.
But how much of it's Kyle's fault? Okay, so it's all Kyle's fault, right? Because he's got the final say on everything when it comes to everything from personnel to everybody they sign, every coach. It's the Kyle Shanahan show. So when they win it all, it's like Kyle did it. And when they lose, if they don't win it all, it's Kyle effed up. So in reality, how much of this is on Kyle? It's all on Kyle's responsibility because he's the guy living in the $12 million mansion, making, whatever he's making, $10 million a year. And, but we've got a good chat here from Ken Ryu, probably not Ryu Ken, but it's typed in Ryu Ken.
It's a Star Wars thing. Don't worry too hard about it.
Yes, he said, without Kyle, we would still be going through coaches, all in capitals, which, that's means pay attention to that line.
You're coming a bit aggressive. You're coming in with some Grant Cohn energy, and I'm not sure we're ready for it right now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Ryu Ken says he brought us back from the grave and made us relevant. Have some damn respect.
That should have
how quickly people forget. People forget.
Listen, let me throw this to you, Larry. So when
Ken's thoughts are very much the thoughts of lots of people out there.
That's a fun tautology. Who would have done better? Who would have done better given the circumstances? So if we're saying how much of this is on Kyle, we get to now do the fun thought exercise of it isn't Kyle Shanahan's team. He gets fired before the season for telling John York that this is a room for real men only. History repeats itself. They fire Kyle. Someone else steps in, takes over this football team for a year. Do they have more than 7 wins if Jim Harbaugh is the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers again this year? Do they have 7 wins or more if Sean McVay or Kevin O'Connell or if Antonio Pierce was in charge of this team, do they have 7 wins still? Like, we can go on forever. There's obviously no end. If we prime Bill Walsh comes back as an AI-powered hologram, what's the record of this team? I'm not sure that there's anybody who prevents a losing season from happening with this team, given the state of the roster. I don't think there's a coach that you could have had take over this team for this season that gets you into the playoffs or has a better result. I'm sure that we can nitpick and say, well, yeah, but only Kyle would lose that game to the Rams, or there's no perfect coach. There really isn't. I think that, yeah, it's on Kyle. Absolutely. They had a bad season, but who would have solved this team's problem, which is they didn't have any depth and they were injured coming out of their ears? Like who changes that?
Have you seen the difference in the schedule from what they played this year to what they're playing next year?
Well, next year's schedule fuck up next year, by the way.
No, but next year's schedule looks so cake. It's ridiculous by comparison.